Okay. So that was the one where we had the user enter a range of numbers. We started at, I guess we maybe started at 1 and went up to whatever the number they entered. I'm just going to go ahead and put an ending number. And let me put 100. But you would, the lab wanted you to ask the user for that ending number, I think. And we wanted, so we had a for loop where I started at, say, 1, and I went until we were in, as long as we were less than or equal to the ending number. And we're going to add 1 to I each time.
Is there a way I can like see your screen?
Oh, I thought I had unshared it when I started recording. Yeah, thanks. I'm bad about
You're fine.
that. Okay. Yeah. If I unshare and share, you got to remind me.
Yes, sir. I will.
Okay. So yeah. So I've set an ending number. I set it to 100. I set the for loop. Start at 1, and go as long as that counter is less than or equal to the ending number, and each time I go through it, add 1 to it.
Okay.
So we're going to go in the loop. I was going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up to 99, then 100. And then in the loop, we want to check. I don't remember what the number was in the lab, but let's say it was evenly divisible by 16. So we could do an if statement. If I mod the percentage modulus 16, if we're dividing by 16, is equal to 0. Now we know it's evenly divisible. If that's the case, then we could see out the message that it was evenly divisible. And we could do an else for the if it wasn't evenly divisible, and say, let me just copy that, is not.
Oh, okay.
So now if I run it, and I got a build error, so where I've got my build error, if without matching, or else without matching if. Here's my if. Oh, I forgot to close my curly braces. I probably had them closed and then, oh,
I see. It was
there. I've got the extra down here. And that's where the indenting helps me see what's missing. Now I've not got a good space. And this wasn't exactly the lab, but let me.
Oh no, this is a great reference.
Yeah.
So I can go back and
right.
Fix everything.
So now, as it goes through the loop, I'm printing out both evenly and not. So 1, 2, 3 up through 15 are not evenly divisible. 16 is, 32 is. Now I think the lab, you wouldn't have needed the else because we didn't ask for what wasn't evenly divisible.
Okay.
So basically, as you go through the loop, you do the if each time and use the modulus operator. And when that does an integer division and it gives you the remainder, and if it's evenly divisible, there's no remainder. Okay?
Okay. Thank you so much.
All right. All right. Anything else?
I think the only other thing is there was one where I got all the area and circumference, but it's just I entered in like pi, like the pi value, and it wouldn't print off like any decimals. I thought that was weird. It
Hold
just
on,
did
I'm going to
the
mute
two.
you just a second. I just heard somebody upstairs holler at me.
Oh, you're fine.
Oh, it's just my son hollering to see if anybody was home. I'm down in the cave of doom, so he just came home. So, all right. What were you saying again on that lab?
It was like you entered in like I wish I could pull it up, but you had to find like the area and circumference from a number you entered in to like a big value, and I did pi for like I think it was for area, I think.
Yeah.
Whichever one has pi. But I think it only rounded up to 2. It just did 2. And not the 2.141.
Okay. I'd have to go back and look exactly what yours did, but if you round, if you actually want to round it, you use the round function, but in C that rounds to the nearest integer. So if you wanted to round to say 2 decimal places, what you've got to do is you've got to multiply that number by say 100, do the round, and then divide it by 100 to get it to actually round. If you just want it to display with 2 decimal places, you use the set precision. If that's what you're asking.
I think that's, yeah, I think that is.
All right. Okay. Anything else? Because it looks like you're the only one showing up. Last week it was true, and this week it's you.
No, that's all my questions. I really have.
Okay. Well, the next topic for us are the while loops, and there are a couple of videos out there, but since I am recording this and going to post it for everybody, let me do a real quick while loop. I'm going to set my I equal to 1. And the way the while loop works, it's while, and you've got conditions just like in a for loop, or not a for loop, an if statement. I could say I less than or equal to 10, and then whatever, as long as I is less than or equal to 10, whatever I do in the loop will happen every time it goes through the loop. It will exit it when this becomes false, when I becomes say 11 or bigger. Now, excuse me, one of the dangers of a while loop is where the for loop automatically changed the loop counter each time, the while loop doesn't. So if I did C out and just C out I, I'm going to be in an infinite loop, one that will never end. So when I run it, it's just printing 1 over and over and over again, and it will do it till I break out of the program because I is never changing in the loop. That for loop would change I each time you went through. So the for loop would set it up so you could have an end. So in a while loop, whatever your true condition is, whatever variables you use on that need to be changed. So I really need here, in this case, C, or not C, I plus plus, which adds 1 to I each time. And now when I run it, it does the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and exits as soon as y becomes 11, or not y, I becomes 11, because we're changing it each time. There are some times, they are rare, but there are some times that you do want a loop to go on forever and ever. Most of that is when you're dealing with programs that are monitoring systems. For example, if you had a program that is measuring, say, temperature or pressure every 5 seconds, you want it to run continuously. You don't want it to ever exit, or you don't want it to exit unless there becomes some danger alert that it needs to do. So monitoring systems and all need to run continuously. Otherwise, the loop needs a way to exit. In this case, we're counting I. One of the things you could do with a loop like this is you could ask the user in the loop for some value, and then you could total it up and maybe have, when they enter a specific value, it would exit. So let's say, let me change this one to I greater than 10, or I'm sorry, greater than 0. And let me start with a cout that says, enter a number inside the loop, and then have a cin and let me create a variable. Oh, I don't need another variable. I'm entering I in this case. So they'll enter the value of I. I do need a total here. I'm going to use a shortcut. The plus equal, it says do a total equals total plus whatever. Actually, I'm sorry, here I got ahead of myself. I need to set the total to 0. I always set a total to 0. And then here in the loop, I would do total plus equal I to add it to I each time. Then after my loop, I'll cout the total. And so when I run this one, okay, I've got errors. What have I got?
You need a semicolon?
Yep, it's missing a semicolon. Yep. Okay, so it says enter a number, and I'll enter a 5, 4, then I'll enter a 0, and uh-oh. Okay, why did it go back into the loop? I said I greater than 0. I entered a 0. Enter a number, I. Change the total. Check I. Oh, I said greater than or equal to 0. So when I entered, if I would have entered a -1, it would have exited. I needed greater than 0 if I want 0 to be my exit. So 5, 4, and then 0, and it exits, and it gives me the total of 9. If I step through this, put in a breakpoint, oh, wrong language. So I was in the wrong place for the breakpoint. the breakpoints let me do the debugging and walk through this one line at a time. If I unclick or click on the red dot, I can turn it on and off. So now I go up, and instead of the start without debugging, I do the start debugging. And it will show me the value of all the variables and where it's at. So right now it's on this while, so it's not gone into the loop yet. And I hit F5 to continue. Now it goes into the loop, and it gives me down at the bottom, and I know you won't be able to read these. It's got the value of I at 1 and total at 0, and it went into the loop. So it's at the enter a number, but it's not actually executed it yet, so it's not on my cursor on my screen. Hit F5 to go next, and now the enter a number shows up. I'll put the 5 in and enter. So the debugger shows me the 5 down here, and it stopped at this breakpoint just before the total. When I tell it to go on, it ran this one total equal plus equal I, so it added 5 to the total, because that's what I entered. Came back up to the while loop, so it's getting ready to check to see, and it's going to say, is I greater than 0? It's 5, so it is. So it comes in to the enter number, goes into the loop again. Come up, and I'll put a 4 in again. So now I is 4, total is 5. It's getting ready to execute this line. So after it executes, total should be 9. Comes up to the top of the loop. Total is 9. I is 4, so it's greater than 0. When I go in, same thing. It goes into the loop because that was still true. I'll put my 0 in. Now, I is 0. If I add 0 to anything, it doesn't change the total, so that won't affect my total here. Now, when it checks the loop, since I is 0, I greater than 0 should be false, and it should finish the program, and it does. So using that debugger, you can walk yourself through and see how the loops go. Any
Okay, I saw that on the last video where you posted it on YouTube, and I watched it.
Yeah.
Because
right.
I didn't even know there was a session that last Thursday.
Okay. Okay. We got somebody else has joined. John's joined. Okay. Do you have any questions, John?
No, I was just joining to see if there was anything I might miss out on.
Well, we're recording it, so I'll post it. I just, we answered a couple of Gavin's questions, and then I gave just an introduction to, I'm giving a little introduction to while loops.
Yeah.
Because some of the labs coming up will be while loops.
Yeah.
So,
I did have a question about some of the labs.
Okay.
Where it says that lab 16, 17, 18, and 19 are due consecutive days. April 6th, April 7th, April 8th, April 9th.
Because we're not meeting every Tuesday, Thursday, what I'm doing is, instead of saying having two labs due the same day or things, I'm just having one lab per day due.
Okay.
Just to kind of even out the load a little bit.
Yeah. All right.
I had been trying to have them due on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but since we're not meeting in person now, I just decided, let's just even them out. You're going to do the same number of labs. I'm just going to post them so they're due on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays generally.
Okay.
Other questions there?
Not that I can think of. I'm working on finishing up lab 15 right now.
Okay. There's a couple of other things with a while loop, just like with for loops and if statements. You can have a loop inside of a loop. You can have an if in a loop in an if, all those. Loops have something, and we didn't use it in the for loops, but it would work. There's what's called a break, and there's a continue. And right now, the way this one is, if I put a 0 in here, even though it's not going to affect the total, it technically, the 0's added. What I could do is use either the break or continue, and in this case, I could use either, and I could say if I equal 0, I can say, if I say break, what it will do is it will break out of that while loop. So the break breaks out of a while loop. Virtually always, I can't think of a case where you would not use an if statement with either the break or continue. And if I run this one now, and I put in, say 4, then 5, then 0, what it did is that last time when I put the 0 in, it didn't come back up and check the condition. It just exited the loop. So if I do the debug, it has stopped just before the while loop. It's going to go into the while loop. It's going to ask me for a number. If I put a 5 in, it comes down to the total. It skipped the if part. I'm going to add another breakpoint in there. It skipped the if because that was false, so it didn't break out. Get back to where it's asking. If I put in a 0, it's now at the break. This if was true, so it went to the break, and when I run it, it didn't go back up to the top of the loop. It just exited the program. So the break says it just exit the loop you're in. And sometimes you need to do that when conditions change in a program. The continue in this particular case does essentially the same thing, except what it will do is it will go up to the top of the loop and check the exit condition. So what we're saying there is, if we change this to a continue, says go up to the top of the loop and start over. I don't want you to exit the loop necessarily, but I want you to go back up to the top and not do anything below. So if I run it now with debug, and it comes in, asks me for the number. Again, I'll put the 5 in. Now, it's at the if statement. The if's going to be false, so it pops up, and now it's going to ask me for another number. When I put a 0 in, comes up to the top of the if. Well, it's still greater than 0, so it comes in to the loop. Instead of, or it should exit the program instead of exiting there. So when it executed the continue said come up to the top of the loop. In this case, we were at our exit condition. but that's not always the case. There's maybe some times where you still want to go through the rest of the loop, but you want to skip some points and go back to the top, and that's where the continue comes in. So there is your continue command. Any questions there?
If you wanted that if to count with negative numbers, you would have to, if you wanted to change the if to where it would count with negative numbers. So if you put a negative in,
I could if I could say if, yeah, and that would be a good one. If it was less than or equal to 0, if you put a negative number, don't count it, but still the exit condition would be 0. So yeah, that's good. So if I debug it now, okay, come on. It's sometimes when I'm recording, it slows down. Well, there we go. So now it should ask me for a number. Where is it? Or is it just before that? Maybe it's just, yeah, there we go. So I put the 5 in. This if statement is going to be false. So it's not going to do the if. It's going to come down. It's going to add the total. It's going to come in and ask me for a number again. This time, let me put in a -1. So now this if will be true. It goes in and it came back up to the while. It skipped adding the total. So that was a good example of it. And now when I put a 0 in, it will get me out of there. Well, oh, it exited the program too because I said I greater than 0. So when I put the negative, it did pop up to the top, but it exited the program. I would probably, if I wanted to keep coming into the program, need to change. Let's make I, while I greater than 0. Well, let's actually make it I not equal 0. So now if we run it, let me exit this one. Come on. I'm going to get rid of the enter a number breakpoint so that it doesn't pause there each time. So I'll put in a 5 this time. It comes down. It's going to add the total. Comes up to the while loop. Well, I is not equal to 0. So it comes in, asks me for a number. This time, if I put in a -5, it comes down and it goes into the if. Because I is less than 0, it should execute the condition of the continue, which moves me back to the top of the loop, and it does. And now it goes in and asks me for another number. It's coming down to the total. Again, goes back up to the top of the loop. Comes in, and I'll go ahead and put the 0 in this time. And now it's going to exit the loop and add those, but it doesn't add the negative. So that was a good example of where you would still want to stay in the loop. right. Questions there?
I have no questions. Oh,
Okay.
interesting.
All right.
I have no questions.
Okay. Was there a question or just something I was overhearing?
I said I have no questions.
Oh, okay. All right. If there's one other thing, and I'm not going to do it. There are a couple of videos on it, and if you have any questions, ask. That deals with if state, I'm sorry, with looping or decisions, I should say, with if statements. Is there something called a case, and it's sort of like an if-else if, and there are a couple of videos on it, and I think there's going to be a lab or two that will have you do the case. You can look it over, and if you have any questions on it, ask. Because when they added the else if, which else if was not part of the original language, it was just if else. When they added the else if, they added the case statement to give you multiple choices. That's sort of gone out of favor in place of doing the elifs or else ifs instead. But I want you to see it. About the only time I use a case anymore is following a menu. But there are a couple of labs there because you may see it in some C++. And there are still some languages that have not added an else if. I'm not sure if Fortran has added an else if or not. I know they did not have that at one point. I've not done any Fortran programming in a long, long time. So the case type statement, or they'll also call it a switch statement. So if you hear either the words case or switch, there's there. The next thing we're going to do after that is look at arrays and think of those as also vectors. And we're only going to do one-dimensional arrays in C++. So once we get through those, there are a couple of little things we wrap up, but that's really most of the material for the semester. Okay. So any last questions?
I have a statement. I'm now minoring in computer science
Okay.
with mechanical engineering. So,
all right.
Nice, dude.
So this class actually took care of one of the prerequisites for that too. So
yeah. Okay, that's good. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and end here. I'll stop the recording, and if there are any questions, feel free to either post it on the discussion board or email me. I am checking email during the week several times a day. I probably won't be checking email till later this evening. I have to go out of the house, actually get to go out of the house for a little bit. I have to go and set up a sound system and test it. Our pastor has decided he wants to try to do a service outside where people can be in their cars on Sunday. So we're going to try and set up a sound system outside and test it this afternoon. All right. Well, we'll see you guys next week if you, if you don't need me beforehand.
all right, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Perry.